We are back, finally back and better than ever. Presley Meyer, Jacob Blaine on the other end, starting 502 Podcast, powered by the State of Louisville Podcast Network, and brought to you, as always, by our friends at Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. Make sure you check them out today at store.mrandmrsbourbon.com. Jacob, how are we doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. I am doing great. I am not camera ready right now, man. I'm learning that about myself as we transition more into video. They always say that I had the face for radio, and we are proving that to be accurate. But I'm good.
You,
I'm really good. I'm not as busy as you though. Certainly not moving houses and getting married within a couple of weeks of each other.
well, I will say you have a beautiful face. Like your
Thank you.
face is just, I mean, we've basically traded bodies since we met.
Yeah.
Like you had that like the extra 20 pounds like right after you get married, and I was like in pretty good shape when we met. And then
Yeah.
you and Taylor got like super into fitness, and I got super into fitness pizza in my mouth. And we just traded places,
Look,
literally.
man. I think
If I
mine's all stress at this point. That's the only way I think I keep weight off is by just
it's
being stressed out 95% of my life.
it's the stress and the cocaine, man. That's what does it.
That's right. You know me so well, man. You
If
know me so well.
if Jacob's employers are listening, he does not do drugs. So just want to put
Thank
that
you.
on the record. But yes,
Appreciate the disclaimer
yes.
there.
If you are a loyal listener of the podcast, it is so funny how this has worked out, right? Because we started, doing podcasts back on our previous site, God, what 2018 maybe, and we've been pretty consistent over that course of time. But since we started doing podcasts, specifically basketball podcasts, uh, it's just not been a good time. And then since Pat Kelsey took over, me as the host of this podcast, my life has never been busier, right? I'm transitioning from like this tiny apartment to a house that's way too big, with two kids and two dogs, and traveling for work, and just everything that it's just an all encompassing just busyness of life, right? And of course, in that period of time, like there's just news almost every single day on the basketball front. We haven't done a great job of having like a breaking podcast or anything like that. Like I love how we did like a post game podcast after like every loss,
Yeah,
but then
we
all of a
can't.
sudden, but Pat Kelsey comes in and brings 13 new recruits in, new coaching staff. Peyton Sieve is on staff and all that, and we're like, oh, we'll maybe get like three pods out there. But no, we're back. We're ready to provide some coverage, and I like that. I like it in a sense that like we can do like a bird's eye view of this. Like we're not going to sit here and just like talk about Javon Hadley for 45 minutes. So you guys aren't going to get
We
that.
might. I don't know. We
We
might.
might. We might. You never know what we'll get into when it's me and Jacob. There's, you're not going to be able to shut us up. So we'll see how succinct we can make this. But 13 new players. The roster is almost finalized. We don't know for sure yet. It seems like the coaching staff is still kind of casting some lines, seeing what they can reel in. Uh, as of tonight, recording on June the 4th, 2024, at I guess it's 8:50 where you sit, Jacob Lane.
That's correct.
Um, as of tonight, we just had a key player announced that he's returning to Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
What's the cat's name? Number two.
Trevon Brazil.
Sure. Thank you. Trevon Brazil. And he's like a kind of like a unique forward, right? Like he's like a combo
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
he's like a four. He's like a four man, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I guess we could start there, right? Because I mean, the not so quiet rumors out there that Louisville is still courting Coleman Hawkins, was according to Evan Maya, who is a guy that we really like to utilize on our site. I talk about his website a lot because he breaks down analytics in a way that's really consumable for the average fan. Uh, According to him, Coleman Hawkins was the 17th best player last year. From what I can ascertain, I think there's like one or two guys returning that were ahead of him last year. So really, one of the best returning players in college basketball. Rumors out there are saying that he's not demanding, but the market value would dictate that he's worth up to $2 million next season. So clearly he didn't go to the pros. He's a guy that could have been a first round, late first round, early second round type of guy. Are those projections out there? Or is it a little bit like more like late second round?
Yeah, late second round priority undrafted two-way contract type of guy, no guarantee of sticking to a roster at this point.
But Coleman Hawkins, right? This is a guy, you brought him up before with the way that college basketball and the NBA is structured. The best decision for him probably was to stay in college basketball because of the way that these contracts are structured. So if he could get onto a two-way contract a year from now, he could ultimately be better suited, make more money,
Yeah.
have more longevity to his career
Hmm.
than if he went in the late first round, early second round. He could be a undrafted free agent after this season, and ultimately make his way onto a roster and be a productive player in the league. And he's a modern big man. Like he's a
Yeah.
guy that he loves shooting the ball. He can get out in transition. He can handle the ball a little bit, but he can also do a little bit like of traditional back to the basket type of stuff. Pretty fleet of foot. Possesses a lot of skills that you don't often see from a guy of his size. I think he's like 6'11", 7 feet, right?
Yeah. I think
You
he's like
know,
6'10", 220, 215, something like that.
yeah, he's but he point being he's a big boy. He fits the mold of a Pat Kelsey player. Look no further than James Scott. He is what I think he is what people could foresee James Scott being. Maybe I know James Scott's kind of like a rim runner, finisher at the rim. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I don't at this point I don't know where the minutes would come from, to be quite honest with you. I don't see it as a great fit with Case and Pryor already on the roster and then adding Noah Waterman. Those three guys are too similar to bring them all in and expect, them to get any sort of impactful minutes. I mean, yes, you could play them, probably 25 minutes a game, 20 minutes a game, but you're always going to be, at some point you're going to run out of minutes to make all three of those guys happy in their final season. So I don't know, man. I think it's awesome to be part of the conversation and, for Louisville to continue to be active. It's not even just at Coleman Hawkins. They also reached out to Jamari Phillips, who is a recent decommit from Arizona. And so they're active for sure. I like the guard option more. I think that's probably more of what they need, especially if Kobe Rogers isn't going to play in 25. But look, when you got a guy of that caliber and you feel like you can swing for the fences and go all in and maybe have one of the best rosters in college basketball, why not?
What is your knowledge on the situation as far as number one scholarship availability? We've heard that there's probably one guy on the roster that's going to take basically take a walk on role,
Yeah.
which is it's a unique wrinkle, right? That's a unique wrinkle to college basketball now because everybody has the opportunity to make money. And
Hmm.
so if you can get a guy that's like a grad student or you can get a guy that's willing to take a flyer for a year and have an academic scholarship or something of that nature, they're still making money while they're sitting out, or even if they, like a Kyle Keurig type of situation where you're a quality player and you just opt to walk on because you're in a good situation financially. Uh, I mean, that's something that we could see in the future, right? You could
Yeah.
bolster a roster and have like an NBA 15-man type of roster now with two guys being walk-ons, but they're quality players.
Yeah.
And this isn't and again, no disrespect to anybody on the last couple of years teams, but it's not like a Hersey Miller type of situation where like people were like, oh well, we'll give Hersey the scholarship if we don't get anybody else type of thing. Like this could be whether it be, there's two guys that appear to be redshirting this year, Ali Khalifa, and then Kobe Rogers, who recently came over from College of Charleston. Love his game. Very
Hmm.
excited about Kobe Rogers. But I would imagine it's one of those two guys because both those guys appear to be redshirting.
Right.
So
Unlikely to play, right. At least not significant amounts of minutes until late in the season at the earliest. It's interesting. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure what they'll do. The word seems to be kind of around Kobe Rogers being the walk on, or what they're willing to kind of do there. And with NIL now, I mean, they can have a brand sponsor that the walk-ons presented by Swag Shoes, right? Something like that. So he can make money, like you said, and not be on scholarship. There are some perks though that being scholarship, and then some things that you kind of have to jump through hoops wise as a walk on. I'm fairly certain. But still, when you're in recovery and you're going to be spending the majority of your time in rehab and, kind of focusing on getting healthy, I think that makes a ton of sense to have one of those guys transition out. But again, only if you can find another player at this point who fits what you need, and who is willing to come in and play a role. Culture and fit, that is more important at this point than trying to squeeze out the final roster spot or two, to just add talent. You know what I mean? Like, you need this team to be cohesive. You need them to gel, right? You're bringing over Rain Smith and James Scott and Kobe Rogers, and then you have, some very experienced basketball players around them, and from Traore to Pryor to Waterman to Hadley. Hepburn has started in literally every game he's ever played in. Like, there is just so much around them that you don't want to mess with the mojo. You don't want to mess with the good vibes. And it seems like, just from the two or three videos that have been posted already, they seem to be kind of, it's very early in your relationship. It's always good, and sunshine and rainbows when no one's pissed you off yet. But so far it seems to be good on that front. And why mess with it unless you for sure know that player coming in is going to accept the role that they've got, or that they're going to play, and in that they understand it's bigger than them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the other thing that comes to mind as well to me is the money aspect. From my understanding, when you're so I think the way the coaches probably look at this, right, is the same way that a professional team would look at this now. They're probably told by whether it be the circle or whoever it is managing the NIL funds, right? Okay, this is the amount that we have. Let's figure out how much we can allocate for each player. What kind of NIL deals that we feel like we can garner
Yeah.
for each player. Uh, my understanding was, you got 13 spots, you filled 13 spots. So, I'm not sure where the money would come from when it's a guy like this who could demand more money than any
Yeah.
player in college basketball this season. I'm not sure on that, but there are three players: Rain Smith, Abubakar Traore, Ali Khalifa, four players, and Frank Anselm, I believe, are all considered foreign players. So there's could be issues with NIL situations there. I don't know. I mean, they go technically, is it out of the country when they go to the land of water parks, whatever it is down there, Atlantis?
Yes, it absolutely. I think so, because that's where, if I'm not mistaken, when UK went there a couple of years ago, that's where Oscar Shibwe was able to make like $2 million in a weekend or something like that,
Yeah,
which is just asinine. Yeah,
but
it's
there's
weird.
ways around it. Yeah,
Yeah,
you could send, if you think that you want to get your guys paid, right? And what are we calling Abubakar Traore? What's the
Cater,
Cater?
I
Cater.
think.
I think, yeah, Cater, Kadir.
Ooh, that
I
seems like that might fit better, but I like
I
Cater.
yeah, I think it's Kadir, but
Kader.
Kadir.
We need to watch
Uh,
a video and like learn this,
yeah,
or we got to get like the phonetic spelling of this on the internet somewhere.
I still like Abu, but clearly he doesn't like that. Clearly he probably doesn't like Booby.
Yeah.
But regardless, say it's Traore, right? And he goes down to Bahamas, and they're like, oh, let's do a Boubacar Traore sponsoring this car wash in the Bahamas, and they're gonna write him a check for 200,000. I have no idea how that works. I
I
really don't.
mean, let's just say the company is Dude Wipes, right? We'll just go there. They could, in theory, go down there, negotiate a $2 million deal with him, where while he's down there, he signs 15,000 basketballs and jerseys and hats and shoes, and then does X, Y, and Z social media posts for, Rain Smith does a post for State of Louisville while he's in the Bahamas. So he can be paid and do it that way, but has to take care of all of that while he's there, off of outside of the United States, and where the legislature kind of sits with this. It's so freaking stupid. Like,
It's all weird. It's weird.
and it seems just so unfair that, and I don't know not much, if anything, about visas and how the United States does all of that, but I do know that their student visas are what prevent them from being able to make money. And it just seems ridiculous that something so simple, such a clerical, like just, oh, we got to check this box instead, keeps them from being able to earn money. But again, I don't know enough about this. I might sound like a flaming idiot right now because I literally don't know shit about how that works. So
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of speculation, right? I mean it's a
it's
lot of
right, which
it,
is how you could still end up having money,
right.
or
And
what I was going to say is not to cut you off, but the other thing is let's just say Pat and team are out recruiting, right? If we go back to what my theory was several weeks ago, is that they were kind of in the mix of getting, being a part of making or helping Coleman Hawkins potentially, make a decision to come back to college basketball and maybe at least consider them if he did, right? So it would make sense that Louisville has been consistent in following the course of those conversations and maybe kind of what they talked about. And they're trying to just see and go to the end. And what he might do is, say, okay, I want $2 million, which I don't think that's going to happen where he goes. I just don't see it happening. But they might say, okay, well, let's go and we're going to ask, just again, we're just throwing out names, but Dr. Lynn, right? We're going to go ask Dr. Lynn for $1.5 million or whoever else. We're gonna fundraise this quickly and gather this money to be able to disperse it to him and be able to negotiate that. Or they could have money left over. I don't know. Who knows? But it's fun to still speculate. I go back to one ball, right? Three big men that do the exact same thing, essentially, to some regards. Still a lack of like a true five bruiser. I mean, that's kind of what Anselm Ivy is. And then, of course, James Scott. We saw the videos of just like how freaky athletic he is. But it just doesn't make sense to have those, what, one, two, three, four, five, six guys on the roster at the same time. It doesn't make sense to me from a structure standpoint. But I'm not going to say no because I trust Pat Kelsey that if that's the move, then that's the move, and we'll go with it because that's a star right there.
it's kind of like the situation with the football team on a smaller scale, right? Where you're not going to say no to a talented player coming in if the logistics work out. And I think if you're a coach and you look at it from that perspective, you're looking at okay, well, we have Frank Anselm, who is like he was like a 2 points, 4 rebound type of guy for like the last 4 seasons. Like
Right.
he's just been a role player his entire career, and that's just he's never played an offense that really facilitates through the big man. So that could be a guy where it's like, look, we have Frank Anselm, but is that a guy that is going to warrant getting 15 minutes a game? I don't know.
Right.
Uh,
You just need him to be like Stephen Van Treese, George Good, like
yeah.
somebody that can just come in and give you five good fouls, like five real good fouls, not like the wimpy
Mm-hmm.
fouls, like toss you around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple putbacks, a couple rebounds. Like Ikoya Gao earned his scholarship in like 5 minutes against Michigan State when he got in that game at the very end. We're like, what? This guy's got nothing left. Like, but he showed it, right? All it
Right.
takes is Frank Anselm to, come up big in a couple of moments to really be worth that spot and to show, as a depth piece that's a nice fit. You got to have role players, man. You got at every championship team, every team. Like we're getting ready to watch what I believe is going to be a great NBA Finals. They're going to talk a lot about Jaylen Brown. They're going to talk a lot about Jason Tatum. They're going to talk a lot about Kyrie Irving. They're going to talk a lot about Luka Doncic. But you know who some of the real fundamentally game changing players are going to be some of the role players, right? Like that's just how it always goes. The Daniel Gaffords, the PJ Washingtons, and then on the list all the way down to guys like Jaden Hardy, Maxi Kleber, like these names. You're like, who the hell are you talking about? What's that matter? Point being, those guys are important pieces to a potential championship team, and they just play a role. They just do one or two things really well. They don't try to, go outside of their lane. They do what they do, and that's what championship teams are built on. And I think that a guy like Anselm Ivy is a culture guy and a guy who's going to come in. You don't have to question the work ethic. Fourth, fifth year guy, one last season, give it everything he's got with an opportunity that's starting fresh. And I mean, dude, unless like if he's not any good, you just don't play him. Outside of that, like your big man situation is really, really solid. And we're kind of getting all over the place with this, but what it does with Coleman Hawkins is I think it just muddies what everybody else's role is.
Sure,
because you're going to
sure.
try to build around him. He will then become
Yeah.
your star player, the number one player, one of the, potential ACC player of the year, thing like that, things like that. And so I'm not sure how that gels with all the rest of these guys. And this late in the process, maybe you just roll with what you got.
Yeah, and here's the way I see it too. Number one, if you're Pat Kelsey, you have a roster in place right now that clearly they're comfortable with. Clearly they're excited about all the guys that they brought in.
How
They
could you
feel
not
like,
be?
yeah,
It's so
they
fun.
yeah, they feel like they're all great situational fits. I was listening just a little bit to Luke Hancock was at practice today, and his feedback they got from the coaching staff. The questions that he was asking were, you're getting better players than what you had at College of Charleston, naturally, obviously, right? You
Right.
have all the resources, everything is 5, 10 times better than what you had at College of Charleston. You had the ball rolling there. Are you going to change your process as you move to Louisville, or did you recruit players to still fit in your system? And his answer was a definitive. We have our system that we like. We play a certain style, and we've recruited players to fit into that system. Our coaching staff is all they've all come together over from College of Charleston. They have a certain way that they play. They are very successful, at the lower level, playing that same sort of style of play, and it's conducive to winning at all levels.
Yeah.
And it's based on what's been successful at the highest level in college basketball, what's been successful in Europe, what's been successful in the NBA. So they're like, why would we change? We're just going to find players that fit our system. And so when I look across this roster, though, to me, there's still a lot of question marks with the big men, specifically like I don't, when I start putting a roster together, and we can get into this in a second, but I do have a lot of question marks. Connie Ruths, you don't know what you're going to get in the first year from Connie Ruths in ACC play. Frank Anselmibe, as we talked about, he is what he is. And then Noah Waterman, a lot of people are excited about this guy, but he's not a true five, really. He's more of a four. He played alongside of Ali Khalifa at BYU as the four.
Right.
He's a guy that he took more threes than twos last season. So when you look at Waterman, he's not a big. Frank Anselm eBay has never been a guy that's going to give you 25 minutes a night, right?
Right.
Connie Roos is a relative unknown. Kaysen Pryor is a multi positional player that can play the five, but he can float to the four. He can handle the ball. So really, when you look at the bigs that are on this roster, I mean, you even look at Abubakar Traore, Kader, Kadar,
Kadar.
whatever,
Yeah.
Kadar,
Gosh, we
Kader,
got to
yeah.
figure this out. We
It's
sound
it's
so ignorant.
I don't think it's Cater. I don't think
Okay.
it's Cater.
Because to me,
But
that just sounds like that, like a little country accent, right? Like,
yeah,
somebody like that would call themselves Gator, but it's
yeah,
Cater,
yeah, exactly,
Kadar
exactly.
sounds more appropriate here.
So we don't know what's going to happen with Ali Khalifa. Obviously, there might be hope that he can get back in like January or something. But everybody that's around the situation has been pretty adamant. Like, look, we want to give him a full year to have this procedure and then sit out for a
Yeah.
full year and get healthy, and then he's the guy at the center position next year, right? So yeah, like you said, there's 6 guys on the roster, but Abu, as you suggested, can play point guard. He's a guy that handles the ball really well. Now he rebounds at a ridiculous rate for his size. He's only like 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah.
But that's because he jumps out of the gym. He's a really physical, hard nosed player. So when you really look across this roster, there's not really a true big man. So I think there is a place for like a case in Pryor to play alongside of a guy like Coleman Hawkins. Like I think that you absolutely that would be to me, if those two guys, they're two huge personalities, they're two guys that can, do a lot on the court, provide a lot of versatility. But I don't want to see this become a team either that falls back on Noah Waterman. And again, it's no slight against Noah Waterman, but if you look at the statistics, statistically, he is the biggest liability on this roster. Just being straight up, that's just the truth. And a lot of people are like, okay, well, I see him as a potential starter, 6 man type of thing, and maybe he could be. Pat Kelsey had great things to say about him. We can get into this as well. He has a rare blend of size, skill, and toughness. Very few players at 6'11" are capable of shooting the ball with the level of consistency that he has over his career. He has a captivating personality to translate onto the court through his passion and intensity. He has played some of his best basketball in some of the toughest environments of college basketball. His addition to this roster allows us a level of flexibility rare at this level. But again, none of his game really fits into If you're looking at the five spot, none of his game screams like, okay, that's the starting five for this team.
Right.
Not to mention that he was, one of the worst defensive 5/4 men in the Big 12 last season as well. And so when you factor all of that in, again, it's nothing is no Waterman, but you have to look at this roster and you have to say, okay, well, are we building to just build for the future, or are we trying to win now? If you're trying to win now, then you got to go out and get a Coleman Hawkins, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be Coleman Hawkins. As you suggested, there's other guys that they're looking at. So clearly, if they're still looking to add to this roster, they still see that there's some potential deficiencies. And so to me, if the money's there, like I say, you throw everything that you got at a guy like that and figure it out from there.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a former teammate of Ansel Mibe, so that's a great, a great kind of thing to keep in mind as well. Maybe I have no idea if that would persuade him any more or less. Just some stuff to keep in mind. But I don't want to shit on Noah Waterman. I don't want to shit on Connie Roos or Ansel Mibe or any of this stuff. But at the same time, yes, we have bodies. There is depth in a sense, but you're not getting a lot out of the five position as the roster is currently constructed. And I think the coaching staff sees that.
Yes, I agree with you. I definitely agree. I think that in my opinion, if I was working on and building this roster, I don't think I would have taken Noah Waterman just because of the fact that you already have some guys who can do some of that. But when you look at, again, talking about being able to play positionless basketball, some of the skills that he brings, and then the rest of this team, there are going to be a lot of lineups where you can hide him defensively, and whether it be putting him on the slower big man or what trying to hedge on a pick and roll versus having to switch off and guard, one on one. There's a lot of different ways that you can hide him and then utilize his shooting. I mean, with guys like Chucky Hepburn and Corin Johnson and then Fat Edwards, like you're gonna get a ton of penetration through downhill attacking in the pick and roll, and that's going to allow for wide open shooters everywhere. And so if you can have a lineup where you have a Kason Pryor, a Noah Waterman, a Terrence Edwards, a Javon Hadley, Chucky Hepburn on the floor, that's five guys that can shoot the ball. You might sacrifice a little bit of rebounding, maybe a lot. Maybe that might end up proving to be a weakness of this team. But you still have a lot of good things that you can do, and it provides a lineup versatility that you can't, which Coleman Hawkins does too, right? But he's going to have an expectation of minutes, performance, point, kind of what his role is. And, I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of how these guys fill into what their role is or what they've been told their role is. So, yeah, I think it never hurts to add more talent. But I think that if I'm Pat Kelsey, I'm sticking with what I have. And I'm leaning on the development of James Scott. Like we got to get this
Yeah, yeah.
guy to ACC. Like we got I'm talking about like on 2K, you can send your players to development camps. We need to send James Scott to potential 101. We need to send him to big man offense, big man defense, athleticism, conditioning. We need to send him to all the training camps so that he comes back at a like 5-6 overall improvement. And you're talking about, being one of the best players on your team, maybe, or maybe the most surprising player on your team. And then you really have a true 5-4 man that you can lean on, especially because James Scott defensively, like Kelsey said in his quotes after signing, is that he can guard 1 through 5. That's in basketball today, man. Like you're like again, go back to the finals. This next couple of weeks, you're gonna see some really elite pick and roll offenses that are going to challenge the hell out of the Kristaps Porzingises of the world, the Daniel Gaffords, the PJ Washingtons. This team is similar in that regard. They're going to be able to switch, 4-5 and be able to do 4-5-3. Like these guys are going to be able to guard multiple positions. And so I think that you can kind of make up for some of the deficiency in star power with the sum of the pieces here, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Do you think, kind of staying on the James Scott thing, I think he's very quickly becoming one of the players that I'm most excited about. But tell me if I'm too out of line here. Do you think that this is a guy that's a potential starter this season?
You know what? That was actually what I was just thinking about while you were talking about Noah Waterman. Is James Scott like? Is that like kind of like a bold take to say he's our starting five day one? Like what? I think it was at first, but maybe not now.
I personally don't think it's a bold take at all. Number one, I mean, we just heard Luke Hancock talking today about James Scott was hungry to get on campus because he knew that he had a 17-day head start on the other bigs that have not arrived on campus yet, and he is trying to utilize those 17 days to leverage himself against the competition. That's the type of guy you want on the
Dude,
roster. That's something we haven't had in 3 or 4 years. I mean, that says a lot right there. And then Coach Kelsey said that he reminds me of a young Marcus Camby, which I mean, look, it,
that's
that
loud, man. Like that's
that's
loud.
that's a guy that averaged 28 and 4 blocks his junior season, and left for the NBA. After his third year, in a time when that was not super
It's
common.
common, yeah, yeah,
I mean, but yeah, that's a lot to live up to. But I will say, when he came in, I was a lot more excited about James Scott than that was like one of those people. We were looking at what is this roster going to look like? Who are they going to bring over? The three guys that I pointed out are the three guys that ended up on the team.
yeah,
I kept going back to the Kobe Rogers thing, and there's obviously concern with injury. There was concern with the fact that he came from the D2 level, but he won a freaking national championship as a starting point guard for a D2 team the season before.
yeah,
And I mean, dude had 4 steals, 12 points before he tore his ACL. Right, it was an ACL, I
yeah,
believe.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
against Alabama in the NCAA tournament. But I mean, 4 steals against Alabama, that's nothing to joke about there as well. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, James Scott was probably the guy that I was the most excited about. And I know initially people were like, oh, shit, he's bringing over this College of Charleston kid that's, he hasn't played very much. He was just like a role player last year, 4 points a game. Like, what are we doing here? When you break down what James Scott's game actually is, he made 96 baskets last year. Yes, 96 baskets. You have to make 100 baskets to be eligible for a lot of these stat databases. If he would have just made 4 more buckets, he would have led the country in field goal percentage last year. That's pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
it's not super hot takey to say that's
Pretty good.
that's pretty quality. He had 52 dunks last season, which was basically about 70% of what Louisville's entire team had last year. Now, I will say College of Charleston only had like 5 more dunks all season than Louisville did. So it's not like they were playing super above the rim, but it was also College of Charleston where they're not getting like superior athletes.
Right.
James Scott coming out of high school, he probably should have been a senior last year. Third youngest player in the country when the season began last year. He doesn't turn 19 until right before this season starts. So super young guy, a prospect that is, if he can get, they're probably going to put another 10, 15 pounds on him before the season starts.
Yes, I would
And this
imagine
is
so.
this is a guy that's a very productive finisher around the rim. And look, I mean, he's looking at this as I have every opportunity to come in and start for a team that has a lot more talent around me than I did last year. For a coach that knows what my capabilities are, for a coaching staff that knows what my capabilities are, and I can come in and show the world what I'm made of right now. Uh, if he develops any semblance of a shot away from the basket, he's going to be nasty. But I think obviously that's the concern right now. He's a fantastic defender. He is an elite level finisher at the rim. Again, 52 dunks in like what 15 minutes, 16 minutes a game last season.
Right.
That's pretty solid. So when you factor all of that in, I mean, this is a dude that I don't see why he couldn't start next season. I mean, two dunks a game basically is what you're looking at right off the bat.
Right.
And that's his ability to play above the rim, his ability to finish around the basket. Again, I think there's every reason to believe that he could ultimately be the starter and kind of an important piece on this team.
I agree. It'll be interesting to see if it's kind of like I said, all hands on deck. Let's get the most out of him as quick as we can, or if it's kind of a gradual progression where he kind of starts with 15 minutes and then it's 20, 25. eventually, by season's end, maybe works his way into the lineup. But I think what's really interesting with him, last thing on the big men, and then we can move on. But I think where he provides a lot of value this year, and really where this team is built, is well, two parts of this. First is what the value he brings and being able to be a bigger guy and guard the big man to the league. Now, this year, the league is going to look a little different than what it was last year, right? You had guys like Armando Bacot, Brandon Huntley Hatfield at Louisville, which is still in the ACC at North Carolina State, but then you have some of the other big names that were in the league, like Lynn Kidd, Norchad Omer, these guys, some of them are gone, some of them are back, but for the most part, that dominant big man is just not in the conference anymore. I mean, PJ Hall off to the NBA. So you're talking about, really the big threat from a big man perspective is North Carolina State with Brandon Huntley Hatfield and Ben Middlebrooks, who are, probably one of the best front courts. And then with Duke, you're talking about a five-star freshman front court that's made up of, Cooper Flagg, who will likely be the number one pick next year, and then two other 7-foot centers who are 5 stars ready to step in and play. So there are some guys. Maxine Reynaud at Stanford is another one who could be kind of the Quentin Post of the ACC this year in terms of a dominant big man on a bad team. But really, what I'm getting at is that the league itself is kind of mirroring the way that Louisville has built its team. There is less dominant big man, more emphasis on guards and wings who can do those things, and specifically big men who can be that 4 and 5. Like they can rotate, they can play that smaller ball, be more athletic, maybe stretch the floor. Versus last year with DJ Burns, really, and Brandon Huntley Hatfield, some of these guys I mentioned are more back to the basket. I think Louisville is built, like, this is going to sound like a take right here, but I think Louisville is built to be able to play with Duke and North Carolina this year. They have damn good defensive guards, right? Like I know RJ Davis is back, and I know Elliot Cadeau is back at North Carolina, and then at Duke you've got Cooper or Proctor and Foster, right? So you're talking about Proctor's probably one of the best players in the league. Same with Foster's an experienced guard now and going into his next season, but Hepburn and Hadley can guard those guys, right? Like they can contend with them. That's a veteran NCAA tournament backcourt, right? And then with Terrence Edwards, Kador Traore, and then some of these other pieces, Corin Johnson, Connie Ruths. There's so much position versatility where Louisville can throw a number of guys at a Cooper Flag, right? The last couple of years, Louisville's just had nothing for these teams that have star players. Trey White wasn't guarding anybody, man. Like you and I had a better chance of guarding some of the best players on the other team than Trey White. This team can defend those guys. They can beat there. They can contend from a roster build and kind of makeup of playing with Duke, playing with North Carolina, playing with North Carolina State. There's some good teams at the top of the ACC. The full conference this year is going to probably be down, but Louisville has a chance in James Scott kind of as the primary big to be really, really good. And that is a weapon that Louisville can throw out at some of these teams that either don't have big men or who will be a mismatch. Like Brandon Huntley Hatfield is going to be chasing James Scott around. Like that's going to be like, oh, I can't wait for that. You know what I mean? Brandon Huntley Hatfield
Yeah.
doesn't want to do that. So it's
Heavy
going to be,
feet.
yeah, it's
He's
going to
got
be interesting to see, how
yeah.
this team they attack an ACC where they're built to win. Like they really are built to win. Now that goes back to your conversation of like why not add and go over the top. You can go either way with that, but even as the roster stands right now, big men deficiencies or not, this team, because of the defensive prowess of the guards, the versatility of the wings, the different styles of offense that they can play, and the freaking shooting that they're going to have, it's going to make this team a damn good basketball team. And most importantly, man, it's going to make Joker and the Thief fun again. Like, we're not going to be like crying, clapping, like, oh gosh, come on, can we just like get
Yeah,
out of here?
seriously.
Like next year, like after freaking Cason Pryor throws down a transition slam and turns around and screams in the face of Cooper Flag, and the Yum Center is going nuts, and Joker and the Thief comes on, and it's a 2-point Louisville game with 3 minutes to go. That place is going to feel like it's 2013 all over again, man. Like, and we will forget all the sorrows of the last few years, and we will sit there and we will just say, like, quietly, we are so back.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the hope, right? And you know, I'm sitting here as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you know, we want to talk about the starting lineups, right? Like that's what fans get into. They get into who are going to be the guys that get the bulk of the minutes. I just want to know who's going to get these balls, right?
Yeah, who's going to catch
And
these balls?
really, I think the more exciting conversation is what, you it's you're up by 4 points against a quality offensive team, what five do you roll out there? And I think there's some really exciting potential lineups. So going from the point guard position, Chucky Hepburn, one of the better defenders at the point guard position in the Big Ten over the last 3 years. And then you're throwing in, I would say, either Corin Johnson or Javon Hadley. Like you really can't go wrong there. Maybe both of them in the game at the same time. Abubakar Traore, again, a fantastic defender. You throw in a guy with a lot of length, and if one thing about Cason Pryor, right, who I'm speaking about having a lot of length and athleticism and versatility in his skill set, he's definitely a risk taker on defense. He's not rated fantastically by like the Torvik or the Evan Maya sites. However, that's a guy that can get he'll steal your cookies. He'll get
Mm-hmm.
in the passing lanes.
And he will
Um,
pin your shit on the backboard too. And
yes,
and then
yes,
will gladly let you know that he just did that.
yes. So I mean, say you throw in a maybe Corin Johnson could be like the sixth man on this potential finishing roster in a close game, right? But Chucky Hepburn, Cason Pryor, you're going to throw in probably Javon Hadley and James Scott. I mean, that's a fantastic finishing roster. And then on the flip side, say you're down 6 points with a minute to go. Here are you putting in Rain Smith, very obviously a guy that you can free him up Ryan McMahon style off of some ball screens and try to hit some quick shots. Terrence Edwards, one of the better scorers in the country last season. Corin Johnson, a guy who's lightning quick that can get downhill in a hurry. And then Chucky Hepburn kind of facilitating things. You could really have a lot of versatility in these lineups as far as offense versus defense. And I think that one thing that we will continue to point out here, and one thing that you'll learn to grow, you will grow to love, right, about these Pat Kelsey rosters. Number one is that I don't think you're going to have the same starting five, um, you know, throughout the entirety of the season. Number one. Number two, nobody's going to play more than 28 to 30 minutes. Like 28 seems like the threshold for these Pat Kelsey teams. They're playing a maximum of 28 minutes. The role players play like 15 to 20 minutes a game, but there could be like a random game where Noah Waterman's like a 20-minute a game type of guy, and all of a sudden you need him for 36 minutes.
Right.
And so it's going to be one of these things where it's like, okay, well, Cason Pryor only had, he had 9 rebounds, but he only had 3 points the other night. And then all of a sudden he comes out and scores 24. You're like, where did that come from? It's just whatever the matchup dictates, whatever the other team's trying to take away. Okay, well, we have another piece that we can throw in there. And the last thing I'd say as well to kind of wrap up this conversation about, just what the lineup versatility could look like, what the roster construction could look like. We talked with Mark Lieberman a couple of weeks ago, and that was one of the questions that I really wanted to get out of him was, okay, when you're looking at this roster, it's not constructed as a roster that, say you're in the NCAA tournament, you're playing up Purdue or a Kansas or a Kentucky or one of these teams that has a number of elite level big men that are like kind of back to the basket, difficult to defend. He's like, as a coach, you're not worried about that kind of stuff. You're not
Right.
worried about, how are we going to defend these guys? Pat Kelsey's worried about, let's put together a team where they say, oh shit, how are we going to stop them?
Bingo.
And I think that's the critical kind of thing to keep in mind as you're watching this team gel and try to fit together this year. Is it's not going to be about, okay, well, how are we going to stop these guys? How are we going to stop, the kind of dynamic duo at NC State? It's going to be like, well, shit, Brandon Huntley Hatfield, like you just said, is going to have to guard these versatile Louisville bigs. That's going to be a huge mismatch for them in the sense that, if you get a guy that's not super fleet of foot, a guy that doesn't like to get away from the basket, that could be a huge, Louisville could be a huge benefactor of that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I know you're talking about forcing them to play at your style. And I think throughout the season, I think in Louisville's highs, we'll see that be at the forefront of everything that they do, where Louisville dictates the tempo, Louisville dictates the defensive play, Louisville dictates the intensity, the pressure, the opposite really of the last 3 to 4 seasons. But I think there's going to be games where they're trying to still figure it out and they go through the growing pains of that, right? That's the hard part. And there will be some tough losses to teams that they probably shouldn't lose to. But when they are at their peak of chemistry and the pieces fitting and assuming that you can stay somewhat injury free and not have any drastic game changing injuries, there is just so many directions that you could go with this team and lineups you could play. I mean, you could probably we could each probably pull out 3 or 4 lineups each that like be like, okay, here's what I would do in this situation. And one thing Louisville has been really bad at has been situational basketball. Even under Chris Mack, Louisville was really bad at situational basketball. I think, in fact, you heard Darius Perry's father, after Darius left to go to Central Florida, say that his son was in a straitjacket within an offense. Like, I think that is something that will no longer be the case. Like, you won't have to worry about any of that with this team. There will be scoring, there will be efficiency, there will be you will know what they're doing. And I think with just all the talent that they have and the natural fits that they kind of correspond with the roster around them, I think that this team has every potential to be at least an NCAA tournament team, if not competitive into the second weekend, and maybe a team that can make some noise.
Yeah, I think, we obviously are so honed in and focused on what this roster looks like, right? And oftentimes I try to kind of back away from making proclamations that the team is underrated or underappreciated. But there's two things to consider. Number one, nationally, everybody has seen Louisville over the last 2.5 to 3 years as this program that's really fallen off. It'd be like looking at like kind of how we see like Villanova the last couple of years, right? Like a team that was once so dominant, and then all of a sudden they've just completely kind of fallen off the wagon, and they're just not. They're basically unknown nationally. So that's number one. Nobody's going to look at Louisville and nobody's going to look at Pat Kelsey as like this big threat, right? And so nationally, they're going to have to earn their respect. Not number two. I think that when you look at the roster construction with 13 new players on this team,
Yeah.
uh, it takes somebody that does this for a living, like a Jeff Goodman or, I'm trying to think of another example. I don't know. I can't think of any, like a John Rothstein type of guy that all they do is live and breathe college basketball. All they do in the offseason is talk to coaches and look at the way that the rosters are constructed. Uh, Unless you're one of those people, you really aren't going to think anything of this Louisville team. When you think of Javon Hadley or James Scott or Rain Smith, Corin Johnson, like these aren't names that are like making people get super excited or super intrigued by what Louisville's put together. But it's definitely a story of the sum is much bigger than the parts. And I think that's what's super exciting as we're going into this season. Jacob, I know we're up against time. Any final thoughts as we go into this roster construction? I'll leave you with this actually. Do you think that Louisville will add another player to this roster, or do you think it's done?
I do think they'll add another player. I don't think it'll be Coleman Hawkins. And then I know absolutely nothing. So this is just purely based off of gut and just looking at how the team is built and kind of some of the things you hear out there. I think they will add one more. My hot take is it's going to be an international player. I don't know that to be true at all, but if they don't land a transfer, I think that they could potentially look at using something late, potentially early enrollee, something like that. So yeah, I think they'll add one more. It doesn't seem like they have any walk-ons that we are aware of outside of Aiden McCool. And when you're talking about practice and needing bodies, and especially some of these guys that are not going to be playing, right? Like Khalifa and Rogers won't be participating in practice. They do need some more bodies. So I think probably one more player. And then I would imagine we'll hear an announcement or two of potential walk-ons closer to the season just to get the number up there. But yeah, I think they'll add more.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you, especially because again, you know, I personally am super excited about the addition of Kobe Rogers, but I think the obvious red flag right there was okay. Well, this is the second player that we've added to this team that's not going to play this season,
Exactly.
and,
Right.
and so And so as soon as that happened, my thought was, okay, something's in the works where somebody's going to walk on, somebody's going to, they're going to figure out a loophole, right? Where they're going to be able to get one more quality player in here. So
Yeah.
I, I'm in agreement with you that this isn't Kenny Payne ball where it's like, okay, we're just going to put 9 guys on the roster and just try to figure it out. Like they, Pat Kelsey is like, let's win now. Why not? Why why
Why
why would we
not?
not? Why would
Why
we not
not?
do that? So
Conference is wide open. Uh, there's never been a more ample opportunity for teams to still doubt you and forget who you are as a program. So why not go all in on winning in year one? I mean, dude, he goes to like a Final Four. This is a far outcry. Not say this will happen, but like this man, Jeff Brom. I don't know if I've said that on this show, but Jeff Brom is king. This man will be God if he gets this team back this quickly. This city needs Louisville basketball like so bad. Downtown needs it. Like the entire community, everyone, businesses, everyone needs Louisville basketball to be back. So it's a lot of pressure, but man, I think they got something special on their hands. And as I keep saying, man, the ACC is going to be down. More teams, Cal, SMU be real challenges, but it's going to be a down year with ample opportunities to win some big games.
yeah, Jacob Blaine, you heard it here first. It's officially God's house. That's all the time we got for tonight. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at the State of Lou, at Jacob Blaine 08, at Press Meyer. Make sure you drink your Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. A lot of fun stuff happening on the Bourbon scene. Mr. and Mrs. will be getting in that soon. Until next time, starting Five02 Podcast. Let's get out of here. Go Cards.
See you later.